this stuff. There's a Bungie website, FTP site, and some other stuff.
Pretty much gonna let it speak for itself. Great, thanks Jason. It's really nice not to be showing you a movie today, and although it makes me very nervous to actually play this for you, I am going to be playing Halo in the flesh.
Some of the choices we have made, we realized that it's impossible, and we went around and around on that and other questions for perhaps too long.
It's his gig, it's his engine. Or, you know, he pushes the coffee cup around the studio really well.
Yeah, I don't see work getting done here. What the heck is going on?
Marty.
I think the coolest thing about Bungie, though, one of our best traditions, I've said this before, people recognize it, is that everybody here really cares about what they're doing, and it's important to them. They do it well, and that's what makes them happy.
After the last video about the life and death of Halo 5, I thought it would be interesting, if not somewhat poignant, to talk about what Halo going forward maybe should look like. Obviously, Halo Infinite is way too far along in its production for these ideas to have any effect on it. That is, assuming the community was ever listened to in the first place. Point is, this is mostly an exercise. Something my friends and I have thought and talked about a lot over the years, so a video about it could very well be useful down the road if they decide to start listening. As of right now, it seems that, generally speaking, many Halo fans don't really know why they like Halo down to the detail. And before you get upset, that's just the default state. We aren't all robots examining every piece of entertainment we intake, and neither am I. But a problem reveals itself when we detect that something has gone wrong with a game or a book or movie series. We then try to figure out why, and finally do something about it without being thorough enough. That's why there's so many Halo Sprint videos.
Sprint is back in Halo Infinite. You either love it.
In a frenzy to fix our beloved titles, we often make emotional arguments and rarely, if ever, get to the foundations of these things. And so, with a multi-part series, I'd like to try my hand at getting there. To be clear, there are a lot of good videos out there, a lot of smart and talented people like Faven, who I think know what they like. With that, I promise nothing except that I will try my very best to relate why I think we all love Halo, and how I think we can take this information to a set of logical conclusions to then make the perfect Halo title in theory. I knew I wasn't going to have the drive to make all of this at once, so this will be split into 3 parts, maybe 2. I'd like to cover first Halo's campaign, which includes gameplay, story elements, art, and music. Then in part 2, multiplayer, including the sandbox, level design, and game modes. And then finally in part 3, it should all be wrapped up with ancillary modes like Forge, Theater, and custom games, which should all be finished off with a synopsis of the entire series. This is a lot, but I'm taking on the bulk in the first video, which will help me finish the series, I think. Not to mention that what I'm looking forward to most is the multiplayer video, and I knew I needed a strong foundation for Halo's artistic tenets in order to make it well. Alright, so we all love Halo. I can't remember if I've ever met someone who doesn't like one of the games from the trilogy. Even those who haven't played it in 10 or more years will still likely list Halo 3 as one of the best games of all time, and one of their favorites.
Large extent, but like Halo 2 and Halo 3, in my opinion, were the best Halos. Like, they were the best games. And, like, they were amazing. Like, the thing is, though...
There's something special here, and I don't want to repeat what many other videos out there say about why that is. It's always something about how Halo was unique and different in the industry at the time and should maybe stay that way, and it should. Or it's about how it had lasting power without ever actually explaining why or how that was, even though it does. Or they'll just say it's fun, and I agree, Halo is fun, but that doesn't explain to the core why Halo works. None of this does. Why are you making a video? In light of this, let's just start from the top. the first thing you notice about Halo, the last thing you remember, and what you adore about it, even if you might not be able to explain it with words. A standard definition I found for tone is this: the general character or attitude of a place, piece of writing, situation, etc. So that's about it. Tone is more or less that feeling you get when you walk into your grandma's spare bedroom and feel oddly creeped out, or when you marvel at the initial loading screens in Destiny 2. It's precise, it's smooth, right? Which implies knowledge and science, but it's not just utilitarian, it's unrealistically complex and artistic, which implies a fantastical element. It's Destiny, right? But enough of the vague examples, it's time to apply this to Halo and first extract what the tone of Halo actually is, and then talk about how that can be perpetuated in our theoretical Halo game. Oh yeah, and I should probably mention, I'm not going to be considering the aberrations from Halo Reach through 5. Population numbers alone back me up when I say that what we loved about Halo started to disappear or at least change with those games. So I'm just going to be referencing the trilogy here. Obviously, Reach through 5 are still Halo games as they have Halo in the title, but come on. You could make an Overwatch clone and name it Halo, those are just familiar letters. But we're talking about their meaning here, their essence. As previously hinted at, the methods we use to articulate the tone of something, a room or a loading screen, or game, is to look at what it's made up of. In Halo's case, the narrative and gameplay is made up of, as a friend Icy Hot put it, an epic odyssey starring Space John Wayne accompanied by a sprightly, spirited sidekick. A journey through ancient alien worlds as nothing more than a 2-ton strong and silent marine dad and his AI girlfriend. And when you consider this, you realize how lighthearted and ridiculous the game was at times. Comedic relief is almost just as common as pressing exposition.
You hit Lorraine?
No, sir.
Then listen up!
But done subtly as to not wear the hero out like an Avengers movie. The events are massive in scale and simple to understand. Enemies are easy to identify both morally and visually. You rely on your ragtag team of friends, including the likes of Sergeant Johnson and the Arbiter, for help. You hear epic, ancient, and mysterious music. And extremely characteristic and unique sound design. Stylized and yet detailed, realistic environments, all tied together by what is basically the US military from 1985, but with spacefaring technology, the UNSC. It's freaking Halo, man, and that's why when in Halo 4, Cortana turns into a mentally ill narcissist with droopy eyes, and the Chief turns into a depressed old man who won't shut up. She said that to me once. About being a machine. It just doesn't work. And I'm not even speaking about the quality of Halo 4's narrative. That's not even important because it's just not what Halo is. The tone here is all wrong. And I'd like to say now that this is almost all you're going to get out of me when it comes to story. I have plenty of ideas about where I would take it, but I don't really like when this style of video gets that specific. When I start talking about the isodidact and the role he could play in the story and so on, it's missing the point. This video should be just as much about how to make the perfect Halo game as what it will actually look like in practice, if not more in that direction. Once you have principles, everything else falls into place. So, we know that Halo is a cheesy war movie from the late 80s, with aliens. Come to think of it, it's just aliens. We know that it's lighthearted and doesn't try to convey a Last of Us styled gripping drama where everyone dies because life sucks and suffering is universal. No, stop it. Make another game if that's what you want. As far as Halo is concerned, we need to retain the jovial, epic, simple, and grounded tone from the trilogy if we want our beloved game to thrive like it once did. Art can be defined in many, many ways, but here we are essentially talking about the aesthetics, not the exploratory elements of art in the sense of trying to relay an abstract message with our product. Although Halo does do that in some ways, but first the basics. Colors, lighting, detail, and shapes. It's no secret at this point that Bungie artists are the best in the industry. They are incredibly talented, and so it may seem unfair to hold anyone else to that standard. After all, not everyone is Michael Jackson. In fact, nobody but he was, if you know what I mean. I can't expect everyone to have the same abilities, and neither should you. But what we can realistically expect is to not make endless artistic choices that fly in the face of what Halo is at literally every turn. We can respect the ideas present without having the ability to execute at the same incredible level as Sheik Wang. That's fine, but what we shouldn't do and what we can avoid is the warping of the source material. So, the Halo trilogy had a few aesthetic themes that ran throughout, and I don't just mean the races. I mean goals in the art that are clear to see within those races and other styles. Forerunner stuff is obviously and successfully meant to invoke a sense of wonderment and expert craftsmanship to the point that structures seem to outlast their environment. The Covenant is clearly religious, rigid, and ritualistic. Human architecture is utilitarian and industrial, no nonsense. In contrast, what we have now is a Forerunner style that looks like 1982's Tron mated with a Bionicle, Covenant that looks like Beatles, and a rounded human structure that reminds me of soft poop. And all of this looks like it could be in any modern sci-fi game, and that's really not good. You could never mistake a trilogy art style with any other game, ever. There was purpose and intentionality, designed to the aesthetic, and the perfect Halo game would respect this and build on it, not ignore it and pervert it. With that covered, let's talk details. First off with color. Halo is notorious for being colorful, even cartoony compared to the titles that tried to compete with it in the 2000s. I think people realize now that styled and cartoony are not synonymous, and the rise of games like Overwatch and Fortnite and other extremely simple aesthetics finally provide a real contrast. In actuality, Halo is grounded, packed with as much detail and texture as the devs could make perform it, but was still admittedly bold in its use of color and environmental variety throughout, which is the source of this cartoon accusation, but is actually a huge asset, and will be a running theme throughout this video. Variety is the spice of Halo. You go from a purple throne room to a bright grassy knoll to a horrific dark blue and underground Forerunner facility infested with a zombie mushroom disease. It's everything in one, literally the opposite of a game like Bloodborne, which is one color, one style, one atmosphere throughout. Don't get me wrong, I adore Bloodborne. It's one of the best games ever made, I think. What I'm saying is that this boldness in color is integral to the aesthetic of Halo, and also integral to the variety in gameplay that comes with this variety in color. We need this, so keep it in mind going forward because it all connects to what will make up our ideal Halo. Now lighting. Color and lighting are closely connected because lights, while they illuminate things to point you towards them or just to let you see what's around you, they can be treated more or less as paintbrushes, and this was Bungie's trademark. A decent lighting artist can bring color and depth into a room even if every surface is gray and textureless. Create highlights, lowlights, color gradients, and atmospheres from cool and quiet to hot and busy. Lights can also be wielded as a tool to make a game look indistinguishable from reality, with subsurface scattering, ray tracing, bounce lighting, and more. Hyperrealism. But this isn't the Halo way. It's used here, like I said, more like a paintbrush. Very soft and subtle and warm in general. Rare is the harsh shadow or sharp line, even though in some spots it may not make any sense, but that's exactly what it is that makes it unique and recognizable. Modern lighting artists will tell you that every light has to make perfect sense, have a source, and react exactly how a real light would. I disagree, and so did Bungie. Look at this yellow light coming from Goldlift on Guardian. Everyone knows this. But have you ever looked close? It almost doesn't even look like light, does it? It looks applied to surfaces like paint. However, if things become so unrealistic that it sticks out, then you've gone too far, but I don't think that's ever happened. I don't remember it, at least. The painted lights were just subtle enough to hint at something, but not make you look directly at it to examine it. Just like how the overall tone of Halo rides the line between fantasy and grit, so too does the lighting, which is actually a large part of what helps form the tone in the first place. And while I can only talk about these parts one at a time, they are all connected and parts of a larger whole. Thirdly, we have detail and shape language. Oddly enough, I think many are mistaken when they think about Halo as simple. I know I've already used that word to describe Halo's essence, and I meant that, but what we're talking about here is environmental complexity. Halo is simple in function, in ideas, in gameplay, in narrative. It's straightforward and memorable, and I would say the same about its shape language, which we'll get to next. But when it comes to detail, when you look closely, you can plainly see in the evolution of trilogy games that Bungie love detail. They can only fit so much in each game, but more and more you see their true vision realized. Going back to Halo 1, they were extremely limited by poly count, but did their best to introduce detail through textures and lighting and particles. In Halo 2, we see the same thing, just more of it, and again in Halo 3, even more. I bring this up because there's this idea out there that classic Halo is supposed to have flat textures, no detail, no realism of any kind. And that's what classic Halo should look like, but that's wrong. The Chief is not a plastic toy. And I think Halo 2 Anniversary is actually a good example of where this direction takes us with modern graphical power. As opposed to this. It still looks like Halo, just way more fidelity. Again, Halo is not Minecraft or Fortnite. The Master Chief in Fortnite should not be indistinguishable from the real model. It's supposed to have some grit. It always did, and to change it is to ignore what Halo was. So, for our game, we're taking it back. No more Play-Doh people. Shape language is next. In contrast to detail, this is where we need to retain simplicity, or at least reel it in. While we want textural detail, we want grit, we don't want too much three-dimensional detail. We don't want bionicles. The perfect Halo game would honor the tradition of recognizable silhouettes and refrain from pumping in polygons for the sake of it. Now, in the case of 343, they are guilty of adding polygons for the sake of it, but at the same time, they have completely reinvented Halo's shape language from the ground up in the first place. Even a simple asset from their games just doesn't match its counterpart in Halo. As mentioned earlier, each Bungie art style has discernible purpose. Forerunner architecture looks like what it is. You don't need to know the lore about who the Forerunners were to infer that whoever made it a long time ago and was advanced. Not only advanced in technology, but in sensibility. These aren't utilitarian structures in the strict sense of the word. They're artistic and respect their natural surroundings. Guardian is built around and through giant jungle trees, for example. But this? All I can really pull from this is that it's advanced. That's about it. But as we just briefly described, that's not all Forerunners are, so there's a lot missing here. Beyond individual art styles and their design in trilogy games, if I had to describe the overall Bungie shape language in a word, it would be efficient. Without getting into the ins and outs of each art style, there is a general style by which you can describe the entire game. What I think is the partial result of engine limitations, Bungie artists seem to make each line and curve matter. Since they only had so much to work with, they couldn't be foolish with what they had or where they put three-dimensional detail. And therefore probably worked from the top down, making sure the level was beautiful and recognizable even just as a silhouette, and reflected the race it represented. Beyond that, they were always careful not to just overload the screen. Generally speaking, if you go through trilogy games, you will find the majority of geometric detail on walls with simple floors, or on floors with simple walls. I don't think modern devs work this way, obviously, or even to have it in mind to. When you're less restricted, it's easy just to vomit out bevels and polygons without considering whether or not each one could be better used. Not to mention that they just don't seem to care about the logic of what they're actually putting down.
Same screen?
Looks like it. I see the yellow pipe things that are ridiculous. They look like shock absorbers. Like, why is there a shock absorber in the hallway here?
If it's hyper detailed, it looks good, bro, said every game developer working today.
Halo 5 is a good example. There is so much shit on your screen in this game, I don't even know where to begin. What am I supposed to be shooting at? Where are the enemies? Is that a bad guy or a lens flare? There's like 50 sources of light and enemies just blend right into the environment. It is a cluttered overload.
This really just comes down to the measurable quality of execution, because a good artist, even with comparatively limitless power to the old Blam engine for Halo, will restrain themselves and be careful to make everything matter. Without even mentioning individual styles too much, this would go a long way to help us retain what made Halo visually memorable. Though, since individual styles were changed in modern Halo, I have to say, there's really no good reason to pervert the vision like this. Unless you're just too proud to take Halo's aesthetic and stick with it, and instead want to impose your own completely separate vision for your own artistic sake. Now, obviously not everyone agrees with me that you shouldn't do this when you inherit a product, because they literally did it, but for our theoretical Halo, we're not going to. You'll find that I want updates, I want Halo to evolve, just not from a lizard into a monkey, but from a lizard into a better lizard. And again, like with the story, I'm not going to start building specific examples for this video and making my own Forerunner tower just to prove a point. What matters is that Bungie's artistic choices and the logic of what they made can be traced, understood, respected, and built upon, which is what the theoretical perfect Halo game would do. Alright, we needed a strong tonal and aesthetic foundation to get here, but this is where the meat really is. If I had to compromise, I would take the plastic look of Halo Infinite or the Transformers of Halo 5 over a proper Halo art style any day, just as long as the gameplay elements we're about to talk about are present and respected. However, right now, we're not going to delve too deeply in player mechanics, as I'd like to save that for the multiplayer video. What we can talk about is the mission structure, AI, level design, and even weapons. Variety. It is the spice of Halo, and in regards to gameplay, this couldn't be more true. I feel like I've seen all kinds of theories and videos out there about why the Halo campaigns are good, from points about linearity and scripted events to openness and creativity being the soul of Halo levels, but I think it's wrong to limit ourselves here. It's clear to me, at least, that Halo, much like with color and atmosphere, had it all. It had those linear and unique scripted moments. It also had exploration. You go from exploring wide open ravines in a Banshee to a timed Warthog run and an exploding ship. To pick one or the other is to completely miss the point. I don't know about you, but I want both. Which is why seeing that Halo Infinite is a semi-open world game that is seemingly set and restricted to a single Halo ring just blows my mind. Halo was a freaking space odyssey. Every mission you are met with a complete change in scenery and location, and come to expect it. Think about being the Arbiter, storming a floating installation in the midst of an alien storm, cloaking in, eventually going loud and cutting it from the sky before barely escaping. And now think about dismantling a turret. Okay, now think about Chief riding a tank to some floating gondolas on Delta Halo, fighting off jetpack elites, eventually beating one of the leaders of the Covenant to death by mounting his e-wheel scooter for the elderly, and finally jumping into the ocean while the Covenant fleet bombards his location. Okay, now think about dismantling the next turret. Yeah, you see what I mean. Honestly, the more I think about these things, the more I wrote for this video, the more I realized that 343 just did not understand what they got with Halo. Like at all. But for our project, man, we're going back to the time of large scale and epic worlds. Absolutely no RPG waypoints and fetch quests for us. I'll play The Witcher if that's what I want. Level design will be left almost entirely to the multiplayer video. Here I talk about how to go about building levels in a general sense, epic with variety, unabashedly ridiculous, etc. But in that video I will talk much more about the moment-to-moment design as it relates to mechanics and the sandbox, which could then be applied to campaign design, where the sandbox is AI and weapons instead of other people and weapons. So then we can talk about AI and weapons. Both of these areas need to be purged of redundancy and injected with predictability and diversity. Halo AI was dynamic, reactive, its weapons unique and situational, all of which amounts to player skill being the most valuable currency within the game. Not any specific weapon or strategy, but the player's decisions. Somehow, the first Halo still has more intelligent combat AI than most games out there, if not all shooters. The success of this design, while not perfectly executed, was the varied roles AI played and the varied ways you could interact with them. There have been endless Halo videos that use the example of killing an elite so grunts run away, which they do, but that's honestly not a great one, because that's not actually a strategy. Anyone who's played Halo games on harder difficulties know that you first take out the easy guys from a distance so that you have room to fight the real threat, the elites. So, grunts running away and the leader is dead is cool. It shows an attention to detail on the part of the AI designers because it fits the grunt's personality, but it's not actually a great example of why Halo AI works in the functional sense. It works for the same foundational reason that Dark Souls works. They are very different games, but at their core both allow the player to learn enemy behaviors and act accordingly. Predictability. I think the better example to use here would be the Hunter enemy in Halo. The Hunters had a clear strength being the indestructible armor, a clear weakness being the back or neck, and clearly telegraphed attacks both with range shots and melee lunges. It's simple, it can be deadly, is predictable, and super memorable. Probably the best designed AI in Halo, and This is the stuff we want more of for our game. I think we can even take this idea and extrapolate it to the other existing enemies to make an even better AI sandbox than Halo has ever had, even before adding a single new enemy type. Like AI, weaponry in Halo has always supported predictability in function, uniqueness in roles, and integrity. These weapons always do the same thing when you fire them, with little to no spread or other random mechanics. The assault rifle doesn't do what the pistol does, and the pistol doesn't do what the rockets do, so they're all different. On top of this, these weapons were always well balanced in terms of how hard they are to use when compared to how effective they can be. Not balanced in the sense that they're all equally viable. They're not, that's the point. They're all good or bad depending, which translates to a player choice, which translates to skill. Remember, predictable, distinctive, and skillful. For example, the sniper is deadly but hard to aim with. Only viable at longer ranges unless you're just good enough to overcome that weakness, which is fine by me. Oh, and it's perfectly accurate. Here lies what I believe to be the single most important thing about what made Halo different, and what still makes it great. At a fundamental level, Halo rewards skill. It may be a meme to say that COD is for little kids and Halo is for men, but that 19-year-old joke still rings true in a way. Because that comes from the identity of Halo's gameplay versus other more simplistic games. Halo is simple, but not simplistic. It's deep, because it rewards skill. There are exceptions to this, like how rockets are both very easy to use while also being the most powerful handheld weapon, which to me is a poor design. A design, by the way, not integral to the idea of a rocket. We can have rockets, I'd just like it to be skillful like much of the rest of the sandbox. Think about Quake, where the rocket can be hard to use at times, but also rewarding. In contrast to the rocket, grenades are a really good example and are incredibly deep. They are completely singular in that they essentially allow you to influence the world in 2 or 3 places at once, one spot with your character and the other with your grenades. Add to this the ability to manipulate when and how they land with geometric bouncing, and the ability to push or pull weapons to pick them up faster or deny the enemy in multiplayer, and grenades earn their spot as one of Halo's greatest assets when it comes to how the game plays, all thanks to this weapon design. And yes, the perfect Halo would keep physics-based weapon nading. On that note, just for fun, take everything I've just said about Halo's weapons and compare it to other games. Combat Evolved had 8 guns, but if you've ever played it, you know that it has more variety and situational decisions to make than any Call of Duty game, even though they have like 60 weapons. That's because 8 truly diverse guns offer a lot more choice than even hundreds of cookie-cutter assault rifles all with the same kill time. Take it only one step further now and compare the tenets of Halo weaponry, being predictability, diversity, and integrity, even to non-trilogy Halo games. Reach introduced Bloom, and just like that, everyone suddenly hated playing Halo. Go figure. There are reasons that random systems like Bloom are bad even deeper than how it destroys Halo's weapon identity, so if you want to know more about that, you could watch my old Integrity video and learn more about that, but I digress. Alright, what's next to compare? Oh, how about Halo 5? The supposed return of skill to Halo. Well, that was a marketing lie because 343 pumped up aim assist settings to make what were originally designed to be difficult weapons to use, now to be incredibly forgiving. Add in Commando Pro and shoulder charging from Destiny, and yeah, competitive Halo 5 fell flat on its face. How about other comparisons? One more recent. If we look at Halo Infinite, in the recent gameplay reveal, whoever they recorded playing picks up 2 weapons back to back that literally do the same thing, except this one shoots blue and this one shoots red. They're both burst energy weapons. I mean, come on, don't they see this stuff? And what's the difference between this gun and an AR? I'll give you a hint, there is none. It's just a different weapon model and reticle, but it's an AR. Much like how Bungie was clever with making shapes count in order to make a pretty game with a limited engine, you can make every weapon count too. Instead, it seems we've gone in the opposite direction. Weapons in Halo have become redundant, easy to use, and random. Not only is this not what Halo ever was, but it's just objectively bad design. Again, watch my Integrity video if you want to know more in detail why I believe this. The perfect Halo game would sport few but diverse weapons, vehicles and grenades included, and tune them to reward skill and intelligent choices. all while upholding predictability in how they function from use to use. Yes, one of the best things about Halo and undoubtedly the most widely recognized element of the series. For the sake of time, and for the sake of not repeating things that have been said 1,000 times over in other videos, I'll be very brief here. The perfect Halo game would feature Marty O'Donnell as the audio director and composer. The end. In all seriousness, I've decided to save music for the final video of this series, whether it be the next video if I manage to fit everything into only just one more part, or if I need a third. Either way, I need to think about Halo more musically, and not just in ways that other people already have. I suspect there are reasons deeper for its success than just its adaptive implementation and top-notch quality that I feel like I need to uncover if I can before I talk about it, and feel free to comment if you feel the same way. I'd like all the help I can get. This is just for my own edification, so that I feel my perspective actually adds something to the endless pool of videos on Halo soundtracks that already exists. So be on the lookout for part 2, although it will realistically be at least a month before it comes out, probably longer, so maybe watch this one a few times while you wait, I don't know. I hope you enjoyed this, thanks for watching, and I really hope one day we'll all get to play a really good Halo game again. Till next time.